Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Building a Cloud-Based Business Intelligence Solution. We are from UC Davis Health. The next slide. So here we are with my team, Suzanne Shelton. She's our business analyst, and Deepima Patania. She's a technical consultant with us. And there is a fourth person here, Madhvi Balu. She's also a developer. And my name is Mangesh Kamal. I'm a supervisor. I was part of this team to start with the building a business solution for the payroll. Next slide. There are a few more people coming in. So what was started of this project objective was to create a secure and shared data sets for our business partners, because there were lots of multiple solutions was in place. And what we wanted to get it back to having our payroll people to have a central location where they can do their data reporting securely, created accurate database reports from sources like EcoTime, Lawson, and some other the UCPath data sources. And one of the things that we started doing was to address the AMAS audit recommendation, because what happened, there was some things was said in the beginning that when the payroll people were getting recommendations from the audits, they couldn't able to get the. I'm sorry, I'm losing words. They were unable to get the required data efficiently, and that's what this was all about. So when we were there, we want to make this reporting solution for all of them, and obviously ensure the compliance policies and meet the applicable data security and other support the payroll operations. I don't know why I'm nervous. Oh, so I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne Shelton.
Yeah, can you guys hear me on this mic? We good? Yes. Okay. So where we started, just to back up, so I have a background in business intelligence and data warehousing, and I was brought on by the payroll team to help sort out the reporting landscape. So I joined the team about 2 years ago, and when I first came on board, we had the typical decentralized reporting landscape, silos of data. To get any sort of UCPath data, you would have to go through Cognos and use their standardized reports over there, download your data. To get anything from, is this my pointer? Yeah, from EcoTime, which is our time and attendance system, you would have to do the same thing. Log into the application, it would spit out spreadsheets. And anything that wasn't on a canned report, if you needed another data element or something, you would then have to open up a ServiceNow ticket, which everybody knows is kind of a pain. You got to get a report developer, they got to query the database, and voila, you get a bunch of more CSVs coming out of there. So if you've worked in this kind of environment as a business user, it's very painful. It's very time consuming. You got to stitch all these spreadsheets together. There's no relationships. Nobody likes it. And worst of all, it's not at all repeatable. You spend 8 hours working on a report. You're not even really sure that it's going to tie out to the source of truth. And you've got to redo it on Monday, if you want to refresh your data. So it's a terrible process. There's no source of truth. There's no security. And as a business person, you quickly lose control of your numbers and your narrative. And if you operate in this kind of environment long enough, you're going to end up where we are, and that's within an audit finding. So that's kind of what the catalyst was for this project, is that people started reporting different numbers, and that's never a good thing. So where we are today, so we've been at this about, I think we're about the 15-month mark, something like that, is that we have created a centralized reporting area, right, in our data mart here. And then we've also coupled this with our Power BI as a service implementation. So this has given us the single source of truth that we're after. It's given us a single repository, a place to publish all of our data sets, all of our reports, and it gives, a single location for our users to go to get all of the data that they need. So it's really streamlined the process. We're just ecstatic with the results so far. And honestly, it really has been fairly painless to implement. So we're here to talk about how we got there. Oh, before we talk about that, let's talk about what it actually looks like. So just to cut to the chase, this is the Power BI web portal that we've put together. So anybody in our organization, just because Power BI Pro is bundled with the Office 365 license, everybody in our organization already has a license. So if you go to powerbi.com, you log in with your AD credentials, you're going to land here, or with a couple of clicks, you're going to land here. You're going to see all the workspaces that you have access to. And so, oh my goodness gracious. So within those workspaces over here, obviously those are going to contain the reports and the data sets that have been published. In this case, these have all been published by the payroll team. So just an example, these are kind of what the dashboard capabilities in Power BI look like. It's really modern. It's easy to use out of the box. There's a lot of different widgets. It's simply just dragging and dropping your data elements and just kind of making it pretty. Really basic. You've got some advanced filtering capabilities, search. It's been very nice. And again, since it's a Microsoft product, it's really intuitive because it just feels kind of like an extension of any other Office product that you've been using. It's easy to pick up and you really don't even need a lot of training to figure out how to do it. Operational reports, it does that as well. If you just like the tabular kind of flat, no visual thing, we've got a ton of those. But the cool thing that this service has given us is being able to enable our users to do ad hoc reporting. So this was not an option before. Again, like I said, people would have to open tickets in ServiceNow, and it was a big rigmarole. But this gives them direct access. So no longer do they have to come to me and ask for a report. They can just connect to the published data set and create their own stuff, and they can run it locally in Power BI Desktop. So this has been a humongous win. Again, we're really happy with it. So, how do you get started on something like this? There's we kind of turned in the beginning trying to figure out like, what in the world are we building here? Is it a warehouse? Is it a mart? Is it a lake? Is it a swamp? I don't know. Dipima is going to tell you about that stuff because I get in over my head.
All right, before we jump to the solution, let me ask you all, can anyone explain me what a data warehouse is, or a data mart, or a data lake? Anyone?
Oh, come on.
Come on, it's easy.
Central location for multiple sources of data coming in from different sources.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. Does anyone else want to take a shot? All right, so that's right. So let's start with the data warehouse. So data warehouse is a central repository for your entire organization's data. So it contains data for all the business and IT functions an organization has. Whereas data mart is a subset, which is, again, focused on a particular business function. For example, in our case, it's payroll. And the data is structured in both data warehouse and data mart. So it may have star schema design or dimensional model or denormalized tables. Whereas the data lake, you can store semi-structured, structured, or unstructured data, maybe flat files. You can have real-time data from sensors flowing into the data lake. So for our requirements, it was function specific to payroll, and we needed structured data. So we decided to go ahead with building a data mart. So let's talk about the steps about how we created the data mart. So I'll let Suzanne start and I'll take over.
I'm going to use my mic, not have two mics. Okay, so yes, so creating a data mart, we just kind of broke it down into these 5 high-level steps we're going to walk you through here. So obviously the first and biggest time-consuming part is figuring out what are your data requirements. Like with any project, we started high level. We were doing Agile, so we just did a project charter, which just kind of laid out the vision and the scope and the parameters. And we just did this to sort of get the team on board and to figure out, get our stakeholders, get sign off, all that box checking red tape stuff. So we get the vision going, and then you create your backlog of requirements, which for this project was literally just kind of a collection of subject areas that we wanted to onboard, and organized it in priority order like you would in any Agile project. And then the real game begins of trying to figure out what the detailed requirements are. So as a data person that was living on the payroll team, I feel like I had a real leg up on this process. A lot of times your analysts might live in IT and there's kind of a telephone game with your SMEs. And since I lived with the business and I was actually doing some of the processing, I had a pretty good idea what the problems were, what the priorities were, and could really dig into the systems and figure this stuff out. So that was a big win for us, I think, as far as this project went. So as far as my process for reverse engineering systems, like literally, I just go into the system, take screenshots of the different UIs that we care about, and do the same thing with reports. Get all of the information that we're using today in one place, and then literally start tracing the data elements back to the table. So as a data person, I'm able to do this in SQL. And I just keep doing this, keep digging through the reports and UIs until I'm able to balance my SQL back to the UI. And at that point, I have a really good confidence level that we have all the requirements, all the transformations, and best of all, it's not in a mapping document, it's in SQL, right? Which you can start playing with, you can show to people, you can circulate it. So that's how we did it. We just kind of baked it into SQL strips to codify all the requirements. And then from there, it was just a process of creating an actual prototype. So I created all of that stuff locally, just with SQL Express on my machine, and started playing with the objects, just making sure that the tables were set up the way that we wanted them to. And in the process of doing this, we had quite a bit of conversation around, what are we building again? Is this going to be a dimensional model? Is it going to be relational? Like, what do we need? So let's talk about star schema. So there's probably a bunch of people in here who know a lot more about this than I do, but in general, a fact table is the center of your star schema, right? You got your fact, and this contains your numbers. These are aggregates. These are things you count. These are things you sum. And then surrounding the fact table, you have your dimensions, and dimensions describe your fact table. And this is a fully normalized situation here. So what that means is that there's no data redundancy. All of your employee data is going to be in your employee dim, job attributes are going to be in your job dimension, etc. So this kind of structure is really good at storing a lot of data. It's efficient because you don't have any redundancy. You don't have a lot of joins that you're contending with in your star. And it's also really good for when you retrieve data. So when you go to build your dashboards, if you're doing month over month or day over day trending, things work really well. So the downside to a star schema is that it is development intensive. It is difficult to change. If you have a requirement change, it can really hose the development team, and they don't really like that too much. And from my past lives, I've found that when you have like a large dimensional model and you have a lot of fact tables, when people go to try to consume it, it gets hard, right? If you have multiple fact tables in a cube, users do not understand that. So, we were considering the fact that our end users were going to be nurses and people that are on the front line in a hospital, and they're not IT people. So we wanted it to be really easy. So we decided that this might be a little bit of an overbuild, especially because in the payroll world, we only cared about the current snapshot of data. So we didn't really, we have, since history of 2015, we have all that history, but we only really care about what the most current version is. And we had a lot of HR activity where they were backdating records and stuff like that, which was just going to get really complicated in a dimensional model. So we took a step back and we denormalized it. So it kind of looks like a star. You still got a central table and kind of some stuff in orbit around there, but you can see that it is no longer fully normalized. I do have some redundancy. I have employee stuff. I have, position number in my timesheet table, that kind of stuff. And the benefit of this is that it's going to result in a simpler user experience. Your queries are actually going to perform better in Power BI just because you're not having to do a bunch of joins and stuff. So we went with denormalized. Love it. No complaints. Okay, so after we had the Power BI, after we had the data model prototyped, the next part that we wanted to prototype was the web reporting solution. So we had used Power BI Desktop, locally within our team, but we had never used it as a service. So there were a lot of unknowns. So we just wanted to run a prototype before we really committed to getting deep in the weeds on this. So, we built some Power BI data sets, published them, built some reports, published them. And then the next step was putting together a beta test group, right? So we started with our team and just brought in some of our trusted partners. And we've simply evolved it to where we now have about 250 people in this pool. And of course, just like with any beta group, you're looking for the user experience feedback, you're testing performance and security, and really just making sure that it's going to work end to end before you start pouring the cement around the final solution. Cool thing about prototyping is that you're also validating your data requirements. I thought that I had everything right and everything was perfect, but then you start putting it in front of people and people poke holes in things. And it's a lot better to do it when you're just working in some SQL scripts than until, you've already got Dipyma involved and you don't want that. So let's hand it over. And, once we have the prototype going, then it was your turn to actually build it.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, so far we have our data requirements down. We know the base tables from which we want to extract the data, and we have already prototyped a solution. So the next step is to build the architecture. So this is a very high level of our architecture diagram. As you see on the left side, we have our data sources, EcoTime, which has the time and attendance data. UCPath has the HR data, and from InfoLawson, we are just getting the cost center data. Then we move to the next layer, which is our staging layer. So before we actually start putting data into the end tables, the denormalized tables, you need a landing zone. It acts as a buffer, a transitory space where you get the data from source, you clean it, you remove the duplicates. Think of it as a landing zone. When you get a lot of stuff, you put it in one place before you actually start putting in the shelves in a structured manner. So this is how the staging layer acts. And I'll explain in a bit why it has two schemas, stage and raw. Then we have presentation layer. It has the DM schema, which is our source of truth that has the denormalized tables. And then we provision payroll workspace to Suzanne. Suzanne, do you want to explain? What did we?
Basically the DM area, this is the part that's controlled by IT. And I do not have any create or delete privileges, thankfully. And that actually I did for a little bit. It was troublesome. But so this is locked down. This is all source system data. It's pure, it's ETL territory. But I needed a place as a business user to upload additional data. Sometimes you just have business source data that you need to be able to blend in. So this is a place where I have full CRUD permissions here. And in addition to adding additional tables, I can also build out the views. So part of our design was to have business controlled views that are actually consumed by Power BI. So that all takes place in the payroll workspace.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. So now, since we had the architecture down, we reviewed it multiple times, got a lot of sign-offs on this one. Then the next part was to design ETL. So what is ETL? It's extract, transform, and load. So we actually identified the base tables from the source, then you bifurcate them into two sections. One is your full ETL and the other one is incremental ETL. So all your small tables are daily extracted and loaded into the raw layer. This one, where you see the red arrows that say the full load. And the bigger tables, you don't want to extract 500 million rows daily and then load it into your target table. So what do? You identify the changed data and you load it into the staging schema first. That's why we have a separate staging schema. And from there, you update, insert, or delete in the raw. So at the end of this first ETL process, your raw schema has a cleaner copy of the source data. And from there, you can apply further transformation, and then you put those into the denormalized tables into the DM schema. So once you have defined your full and incremental ETL process, the next step is to design and define the ETL metadata. So what's a metadata? It's the data about data. So we really brainstormed on this one, what columns, what metrics would be helpful to measure ETL performance and also help us in troubleshooting. So when we design the ETL jobs, it logs in some IDs and the run times and the start and the end times. And that also helps us in the error handling process. So we have email notifications that are sent out to IT if there's a failure, and also the success notifications, especially to payroll, because they control Power BI. So they want to know when the ETL run has finished, and that's when they can refresh the reports in Power BI. So once you have designed your ETL, the next step, So I wanted to go a little bit more in detail on the full work versus incremental. So full is easy. You truncate your target table daily because our requirement is to get the daily snapshot from the source. And then you load from the source to the raw table. For the incremental ETL, that's where it gets tricky. So to identify the changed or new data, there are a couple of techniques. So the two techniques that we applied were, one is the hashing algorithm. So both Oracle and SQL have the capabilities to create a hash value of your row. So your table that has the hash value created, it'll be unique. So you sort the data, you compare yesterday's hash to today's hash, and then that's how you capture the changed data. The other technique is you identify how in the source the data is being written or changed. So we had to go to the vendor to understand the business process, and then codified it using SQL. So once you have identified the change data, the process is you load the staging tables. And one of the metadata fields that we have is ETL status. So we mark it ready when it's in the staging table. Then when we load from staging to raw, we mark the ETL status as loaded, and then we do the validations. Okay, so once we have done this, we create the ETL packages. So we have used Microsoft SQL Server Integration Services, SSIS, as our ETL tool of choice. So you create ETL packages to load data from raw to the DM schema. And this is one of the snapshots. This is how SSIS looks like. You can create workflows based on what business logic, what SQL logic do you want to apply. And then we leveraged the SQL scripts written by Suzanne during the prototyping. So that was very helpful. So once you've loaded the data mart, you have your design for loading the DM. The next step is to enhance it further. So we have SSIS has inbuilt parameters for logging. So it captures the runtime, the execution IDs, as I mentioned before. So as you see, step 1, 2, and 3, the before and after, it logs in the parameters. And this is the example. So in the first table, I'll just highlight the main ones. You see the process, which is actually the table name, the step, the start, end time, and the run duration. And this table you see here, it shows you how many number of rows were loaded into the table, the table name, the username is nothing but the service account that is running the ETL jobs. And the computer name is server, just making sure everything is in compliance and no one else is running your ETL jobs. All right, just an overview, just a recap. This is our architecture. We have applied full load, incremental load logics. We have loaded the raw schema, the DM schema, and then Suzanne has loaded data in her payroll workspace and created the views. So the next step is to build a front end. So how do we create the Power BI solution? Okay, so the first thing is configure the gateway. What's a gateway? So our data source is on-prem, it's in the SQL servers, and Power BI is on the cloud. So when you create data sets in Power BI, it doesn't refresh automatically from on-prem. So you need a mechanism for them to talk. So there's a Power BI gateway. We provisioned a virtual machine and you install it just like any other application. You configure it. And then in the Power BI data sets, you point to that gateway. And set up the refresh times. So that way your data is getting refreshed automatically within Power BI data sets. And okay, over to you, Suzanne. She'll explain how to create the data sets and reports. Thank you.
So at this point, I don't need another microphone. Oh. At this point, everything is downhill because all the hard stuff is taken care of. You put all your logic in the data model, you hand it to the ETL team, and now it's their problem. They've got to load it every day. And at this point, you've got your gateway configured, everything is ready to go. So at this point, all you do is you open up Power BI Desktop, you connect it to your on-prem SQL Server database. And in our case, we were using the views. So then I imported all of the views over into the desktop. And similar to other tools, you just set up the relationship between your objects. It's, drag and drop, really easy, just like any Microsoft product would be. And you can also, if you want, if there was data elements that for whatever reason you didn't want it in the model, maybe you wanted it in this layer, you can also create some additional attributes in here if you want. Once you have that set up, then it's literally just a matter of clicking save and you publish it up to the service, and it is now available to everyone, right? Now, before you start telling everybody that it's out there, you probably want to secure it, right? Security is a big part of this, especially when you're dealing with finance, payroll information. So this was a big part of the project as well, was figuring out how we wanted to secure it. So we decided to handle the row-level security component in SQL Server databases, or within the database. So we designed these data mart security, these DMS tables, to house all of this information. So this is actually going to tell you for each user of the data mart exactly which employee records they're going to have access to. And to do this, we had 3 different models that we wanted to work with. So the first model was based on the org structure that was in UCPath. So this is just pure reporting structure. So if I'm a manager, I want to be able to see my direct reports, all their direct reports, and so on. So that's the first model. The second model was based on timesheet information that we had in our time and attendance system. So over in there, you know, you have timekeepers, you have managers and admins and all kinds of stuff viewing different people's timesheets. Well, we wanted to say that, you know, whatever timesheets I can see in EcoTime, I want to see those same records in the data mart. Pretty easy, right? And then the third model is just an explicit model where we as a payroll team can explicitly define which employee records a person can see. It's in a table in the payroll workspace. So all of that magically every night gets bundled up by the ETL process, and it gets dumped off into a simple DMS table. And that's how that handles. It runs nightly. You really don't have to think about it once you get it set up. The next step is to get Power BI to now look at your DMS table. So this is handled through, they have actual row-level security roles that you can define in your Power BI data set. We wanted to keep it simple, so I just created an admin role and I created a user role. So basically the admin role, you know, is going to be able to see everything, and the user role is going to look at that DMS table. It's pretty easy to do. You literally just set some filters over there, and it's going to control which records get rendered when a user logs in to the service. So then the third component of that, now that Power BI is talking to your security table, is how do you map users to the row-level security role? And you do that through the Azure Active Directory. So this is different than the on-prem Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is what plays with Power BI. So in keeping with simplicity, I just mimic the row or the security groups that I created in Power BI. I just mimic those as security groups. So I have one for admin, one for user, put the different users into those categories, and then simply map them over here in the data sets to my security group. So now row level security is just going to flow all the way through, and it's very straightforward. We haven't had any issues with it so far. So then once you've got row level security in place, you probably want to think about column security. You know, sometimes there's sensitive data, there's PII, social security number, things that you don't want everybody to see, even if they do have record access. So, you know, for us, it was all about payroll data. You probably don't want everybody looking at everybody else's salary, right? So we handle this just also in the data set layer. This is just a dynamic attribute that gets created that just looks to see if you have permission. If you do, you can see the data. Otherwise, we just redact it. Pretty basic stuff, easy to do. So now you have your data set in the cloud. It's secure. You're ready to start creating reports. And this is literally the last step. It's the easiest step. It is drag and drop. You do it in Power BI desktop, connect to your data source in the cloud, and you just pull the attributes onto your report. So you can see, here's my EcoTime data model. I have all these different objects available, and it's just drag and drop. It's really easy. You can set up your widgets, get it, you know, formatted the way you want it. And then just like you did with the data sets, the user just clicks save and you publish it. And that's the end of the road. Can you hold that until the end? I'm almost there. Once you get that done, you know, you publish it up into the cloud, and now anybody that has permission to that workspace is going to see it. And it's just really super great. I couldn't say enough great things about this. So just to recap where we are, right? So we created the central data mart. All the ETL stuff happens here. This is all within payroll's domain. So we control the data sets that get published. We control the reports that get published, and our end users have a single place to access it. So it's automated, it's secure, it's source of truth. We don't have any more audit findings. And, you know, the really cool thing about this, since it's in the cloud, is that it's completely scalable. So now our next phase is we're just going to be building out, just continuing to add more data, continuing to add more reports and extend the user base, expand the number of people that are in there working with the data. So that's what we did. I'm going to hand this over to Mangesh, who's going to talk about some of the things that we did well with this project.
Oh, thank you. So as you can see, the success factors were, what were the success factors? So Suzanne, she's from payroll, she's not IT, right? And she was an integral part of the entire project because she was just taking over the entire Power BI development. We IT people, we did not do any Power development at all. We help her with the gateway configuration, but that's for and procuring the VMs and other stuff. But that's where we went. But she was the one who did the entire Power BI development. So that collaboration was a success factor for us. Without that collaboration, I don't think so. We will be here. And this is one of the cornerstones that we want to talk about. That if we have a business partners in the game, I think the project will go much smoother because they have much more. And those requirements did not come from us. She already knew what she was looking for. What we were working on was a pure ETL development. It's all the databases behind the scene. What's the production support should look like? All those things that we IT folks care about. We take care of them. But the Power BI it's all Suzanne. Our team. I told you in the beginning that we're people of 4 people only. So these 2 ladies here, there's one more person missing from this, and me. We're the 4 people only, and we want to take this as a challenge and see what we can do. But given like more people on this project, we would have done it in a short time, I guess. But here we are. The rapid prototyping. So I do want to talk about the rapid prototyping. So we started our project with the waterfall style first. And honestly, it didn't work out very well. So quickly we pivot, and then we went to the agile. So the way we were trying to do was Suzanne was prototyping it and giving it to us, and our developer will start working on it. And by the time my developers were finished, she has already done some other stuff. So it's like a continuous loop cycle that we were continuously building. And our agiles were like 4 weeks, and we were delivering every 4 weeks. That's one of the things that we kept it honest to ourselves. No matter what, we will never miss a deadline that you have to deliver something on the. So I was their ringleader, by the way. They hated me every day when I do stand-ups, and they hated me saying, what you cannot do. So sorry about that, ladies, but that's the way it works. So what's the next slide? Oops. So the wins. Single source of truth. That's the one that we wanted to get out, right? So what we achieve is multiple sources to a single source of truth. And I think decentralization of data, was one of the, democratization of data. Everyone in the UC health system now has access to our reports. It's one single place. And that is one of the most important thing. Audit compliance, I talked about in the beginning, that now payroll has a way to look into these reports and just procure what they want to give it to the auditors. And standardizing time and attendance metrics that, for example, we have this policy, I would say, that how many timekeepers are not approving the timesheet on time, something like that. So, there is a metric that, HR people, payroll looks at it, and because we have a deadline at 1 o'clock, we need to approve the timesheet. So those are things that we are looking into it. Okay. So with that said, I think we can open up the questions. You should come here and stand. Suzanne, you should come and stand.
Hi, my name is Astrid and I'm with UCI. I was wondering, on your user security role, did you just have one one setup so all users could see all of the data for like all of the employees? Or was there some sort of drill down that happened so they only saw their reports?
So that is where we built the data mart security table. And so literally I created 3 different views, one that pulled people that were in a person's organization, one that pulled timesheet groups that they had access to, and then one that was looking at that explicit table that I told you about. So within that, user 1, they may see 25 employees, and those employees are stored in the DMS table, right? So when that person logs in, Power BI only serves up those 25 records. So it's true row level security based on the rules, the different models that we implemented.
So
We
utilizing,
have complete control over every record that each user can see.
but utilizing Power BI to create that added level of security.
Part of it, so the DMS table we created in SQL.
Okay.
And so the ETL is looking at some views that I've created to say, here are the different models, right? And then it bakes it into the table. So the table specifies which records a person can see. And then, Power BI utilizes that table in conjunction with Azure, right? It's kind of a 3-step thing. It's not in one place, but those 3 components together, you can actually control exactly which records will be rendered when a person logs in.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Ganesh from UCLA. Have a question. Once data is copied to, it's refreshed to Power BI, like you have on-premise database, and that data is refreshed to the Power BI. So how that data is secured, the database itself? Is it only be accessible through the Power BI user interface, or?
Well, that data set is published, first of all, in a workspace, right? And I don't, be hard to get back to that original slide, but I publish the data set to the workspace. So only the people that I say can access that workspace will actually see that to begin with, right? So there's that layer of security. And within the data set, when I connect to it, it's also it's utilizing the row level security and the data mart security tables within that data set. So you can't really write SQL against a Power BI data set. You can connect to it through Power BI desktop. So that is our go-to strategy right now. That is our data delivery model, is strictly accessing it through the Power BI data set, right? So that's where the row level security exists. It's not in the table. So we have a lot of IT groups that want to access the table directly, but we're not at that stage where we have row level security at the table level. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Hi.
So you have SQL Server database, and how did you use the configuration gateway to connect that to the Power BI?
Yeah.
So when you install the gateway, it's a very simple configuration. You put your email ID that has access to Power BI. And then after that, within Power BI console, where you have the data set, there's, I wish we had that screenshot. There's a page where it asks you, does it have any managed gateways? And that's where you add the gateway name. So it also detects because it's all on the same network. So once your gateway name is detected, you add that to your data set. And then further down the line, you can set up the refresh times and all of that. It's pretty simple.
So basically, every time I upload a Power BI file, it goes and it looks for all the data sources that I'm pointing to in my Power BI data file. And it'll check to say, this is not associated with a gateway, and it won't refresh. But once I go into that data source and I map it to the gateway that she's created, then the Power BI will start refreshing on the schedule that I set.
So you put your SQL Server name in the gateway, and then it's
Not in the gateway.
No.
So when you create data sets within Power BI, you're already connecting to SQL Server. So it has that connection. The next step is to make these two talk. That's where you need the gateway to make these two talk.
Question about the end user training. You said you had about 250, and I imagine that's going to expand. And a lot of those people may have never had Power BI experience. So how did you do videos on how to create slicers and filters and different visuals within Power BI?
So it's just me, right? As much as I would like to say we had a robust training thing, my thing was just, hey, we're in pilot mode. I just want to see what people are going to be able to do intuitively, right? To see how easy this is to use. We haven't got a big training module built out yet. Fortunately, there's a lot of information that's in the learning management system already. So, you look at Power BI and it just comes back with a bajillion tutorials. And one of them is just a basic one that I point people to that gives them an overview. But honestly, I think the best training that's available is just straight from Microsoft. They have the people that built this actually giving presentations on how to do it. And they're just 10-minute clips that people can watch. So, before we do a wide scale rollout, I do plan on sort of getting sort of a welcome packet and here's some training stuff that you need to watch before you start emailing me a million questions about how to do a filter, right? Because we're a small team and we don't really have, that's one of the things that's like, we really got to think through how we're going to do this rollout to make sure it's just not chaos and that the users are supported. Yeah, good question.
So now that you've done this, are there things you learned along the way that you would do different if you had to do it over, or things you put on the roadmap for future improvements that you're thinking about?
I have been super surprised about how easy this was. I really thought it was going to be a way more complicated thing, getting the Power BI working smoothly with the security. I wouldn't change anything around that. Just you always have doubts about your data model. Like I could have done this differently. Did we do the right things? But I think now that we've got it up and working and it's being so successful and people are I'm actually starting to see users create their own reports and I'm seeing them published. And I'm like, I didn't even tell you could do that, but they're doing it. So it's really exciting to see that. One thing, there are some things that I wish that we had a dimensional model for, like there are some things where people are already wanting dashboards where they're seeing month over month changes. Like I want to see how my timesheet approval rates have changed over the past 6 months. We can't really do that now with just the current snapshot. So, but that would just be a future item to build out a dimensional model for selective, components that we really want to trend. Yeah. Did you have anything?
Yeah. My name is Manohar Rana. I'm from UC Berkeley. I have a lot of questions, but just one question for now is, Deepima, you said you thought about moving from completely denormalized to somewhat, like the other way. So why not fully normalize data structures? Have you given a thought about
So why we have fully denormalized tables in the DM schema in the data mart?
Right, you removed, you made it somewhat, denormalized, reduce some joins. And so what was the thinking behind that? And then why not fully denormalized then?
Do you want to answer that question? Because
I advocated for not fully denormalized or for not fully normalized, just for usability.
Why not?
Oh, just completely flat tables. Well, I think that's kind of where we are, right?
I think so. So if you look at our table structure, so like if let's say we have an employee master table, so you'll see all the attributes for an employee in that employee master table. So
You have a data mart and then after that you have like fully.
no, it's within the data mart. That's how our table structures are in the data mart. So as she mentioned, our end users are like nurses and not the IT people. So it's easier for them when she creates the data sets, it's easier for them to understand, okay, now I'm looking at the employee subject area within the payroll. So, okay, it somewhat makes the data interpretation easier. So that's the route we went.
Hi, so I could see as users get access to this, that they'll have more questions and want more data. What process have you started or will you set up to kind of ingest those requests and then prioritize what additional data sets or systems you integrate into the reporting?
That's a great question.
Mangesh?
So,
No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
Mangesh, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, so by the time we were in like a third or fourth sprint, we were already receiving requests for data because we were visible on the dashboard, right? Already. And one of the key things for the payroll, yeah, we have 1 minute. So one of the key things for the payroll is the interpretation of the data. So the request, what I was getting at, they want a direct access database, right? Simple. They just want ODVC, JDVC, whatever, they want access. But that's not how payroll wants to. They want to know if I'm saying this is the balance of your PTO, then this is the balance of your PTO. They don't want to interpret. So we are working on the ServiceNow catalog item right now to have that access request created and see how we can either give them the data in the form of a service and they can ingest that data as a service, or maybe we can create a place for them to get the data at the time of the day or whatever they want to get some of the extracts. And we want to control the narrative, the interpretation of the data. So it's coming. We don't have the complete solution yet.
Can I just piggyback on that? But
Sure.
I think in general, I mean, like the agile backlog is going to live on, right? You never get to the end
Yeah.
of it. So obviously, as a payroll team, we've got our sights set on systems that we want to bring on board next. If there are smaller subjects that people want that we think, as a team would be useful, we can work those in, because we have that flexibility since we're agile.
And the benefit of you being in the business.
Absolutely, for sure. Yes, time's
Okay,
up.
Time's up. Thank you, everyone, for
Yeah, thank you.
attending. Please use the scan the QR code to get the presentation.